more of where you're at through the first 6 months, and I think we agreed last time that we talked, we would update projections based on 6 months worth of data to try and ferret out some of those more conservative positions and see what looks more realistic for a 2025 budget projection. So we've done that with the data from the auditor's office, looked at different revenue sources. The primary ones that we adjusted based on June 30's collections and some of the previous data were the health funds. They just seem to be well above pace than they were in the first half of 23. So we've adjusted that miscellaneous revenue up, which in turn allows more of the property tax for 25 and forward to be allocated to the general fund rather than to the health fund. The other ones that we found that were fairly off were MVH restricted, wheel tax, and local road and street. Now the MVH restricted and local road and street, the estimates that we picked up to use in the fiscal plan was what the state had certified, and they have their own methodology that they use, which granted is conservative, and why I typically use that number is I'm afraid that they have information that we don't have. So when they project that next year period, which they do right now, so today they're going to put out data and it's going to look at all the way through 25. So we utilized that in your revenue projection. However, if I go back and I look at June 30, the collections that you have collected in the first half of 24 and the collections that you had in the last half of 23, which would be post when the state said this is the formula we're going to use. I picked up those two amounts. It brings it back more to a historical amount of where you would be. Local road and street, we're looking at, you funding your normal street operations from there. MVH, it brings it more in line to the budgets that the highway superintendent has presented for MVH restricted and local road and street for 25. We've worked those into the fiscal plan, that's in there for you. It does look like as you get to the out year of like the MVH fund, you're short about $140,000 a year. So again, as you revisit wheel tax and surtax, you might want to think about that in a future year, or you may want to pay for some of those expenditures, particularly like capital involved for MVH from the general fund, and we'll get to that in a minute, that you're going to show a nice surplus going forward in the general fund, less a recession. And why I say less the recession, two material changes on the revenue side for the general fund that we looked at was going back to that interest revenue. In previous years, prior to the interest rates ratcheting up quickly, and you have been adding to your cash balance, your interest collections in that fund were only a few $100,000. Last year, they were about $2 million. The first plan that we looked at conservatively, we went back to $500,000 a year, because we want to try and project what do we think it's going to be for 24, 5, 6, and 7 for that 4-year period. I went back, did a little research, looked at the Fed's projection of what they think rates should be across that same period, and they like dot plot all the different participants of the Fed, and their projection is they believe 25 should be about 1% lower than 24, 26 1% lower yet, and 27 0.5% less. So what I did interest-wise is I pegged the general fund for 24 at about 5 1/4. Then I took it to 4 1/4, 3 1/4, and 2.75. If we do that, and if that's a realistic estimate that we want to run off of, there's a lot more interest revenue there to be had. There's a lot more interest money that you can spend toward other operations. You can save it for capital projects. You can use it for fortifying your rainy day fund. The other thing that I did was I went back and I looked at the local income tax model. And, you know, one of the comments in your notes, or for the, they're in your notes, but also in your agenda, you received supplemental distribution in May for the general fund north of 700,000, and then the public safety lit fund north of 500,000. So the state, based on their conservatism of sending your income tax money back to you that you've all paid in as a group, they were short $1.2 million just for you, not the cities and towns and everybody else, just you as the county. They shorted you $1.2 million had they had better information or used more aggressive estimates. If we look back historically, I went back 5 years. This is the 5th year in a row that they have apparently used the same methodology in that conservatism, and then there's a statutory formula that makes them flush out the 700,000 and the 500,000 to you. So what I did is I mocked their methodology in that statutory formula and took it forward based on, as we talked about last time, the growth in your income tax year to year at 3%, because I think your last growth was like 6%. So I still think I'm on the conservative side. I mocked their methodology and showed those amounts coming back into you. And why I say all of these, I think, are good unless we have a recession. We know at some point in time we're going to have a recession. How severe will it be? How long will it last? We don't know. The first two things I would expect to dry up is the state will change their methodology on the income tax distribution to short you the supplemental, potentially short your ongoing income tax distribution, because they're always working on an estimate that is 2 years old based on actual audited income tax data. The other thing, if we've seen historically, the Fed's response to a recession may be to cut rates back to nothing, and then your interest earnings are going to go away. So this, I feel like, if we don't have a recession, this is where you would be. I think surplus-wise, you're at about $1.75 million a year to the good on the general fund. And like I say, the only caveat to that I would say is there will be a recession at some point in the future. You'll have to address that. Don't know how significant it is. So I don't know if you want to wait to see those amounts materialize year to year and then utilize them for projects, or if you want to assume through the majority of the time you're not going to have a recessionary problem and allocate some of those funds toward operational increases going forward. But you know, once you commit that to operations, you've built it into the model going forward, and it's always going to need to be provided for. Now, that being said, you know, you do still have other capacity to raise additional revenue as you have in the past with local income tax, et cetera, if you were to find yourself in a position operationally upside down in future years. But like I say, at this point in time, you know, that looks good. You've got 25 budgets, like I say, for MVH restricted, local road and street, and Cume Bridge are built in as per the superintendent. And the base assumptions, again, as the fiscal body, we would always like you to read those assumptions at the end, the last couple pages of the fiscal plan, because that's what makes all the projections true. I think you're looking at like a base 3% growth factor in expenditures. Let's see, a couple of the other things to address. You will be looking at next an additional appropriation from the general fund of like $500,000. That's not a problem based on the cash reserves that you've established. You've established really good cash reserves in the general fund, public safety lit fund, and the motor vehicle highway fund. So if you want to take $500,000 out of this and allocate it to the RDC, that's not a problem. I think one of the others to look at was jail repairs. We would advise that for those jail repairs, you pay those out of the public safety lit fund. Two reasons for that. One, you have established a good cash reserve in there, but my advice to fiscal bodies is always spend your most restrictive assets first. You can, subject to legal counsel, I think you should be able to do any jail repair from that public safety lit fund per its definitions. But there are certain expenditures that you can make from the general fund that you otherwise couldn't make from the public safety lit fund. So spend that public safety lit fund first, because the general fund we can use for anything, including public safety. Before we get into the discussion of the courthouse debt, any questions on kind of operationally in the model and the fiscal plan?
Not a question, just observation going back to your discussion on interest, the additional interest income. I guess if you look down to our net increase in funds,
Yes.
that's basically what it is, isn't it? Just our
That's the
interest
biggest
earnings.
part, the local income, the supplemental income tax as well. I think it's contributing to that, but you're right, that is the primary driver.
I mean, if you look, I guess I was looking at miscellaneous income revenue and compare that to the net increase. So yeah, I think as we go forward, just need to keep that in mind, so.
I was looking, property tax revenue on your scenarios with the value of homes. I think it was 250 and 300 or 350,000.
The tax impacts, yes, we worked
And-
those in there for you.
And they went up, but not significantly. And a couple of questions there. One is, there's a lot of talk in the state's going to redo the tax code for property tax. Is that going to be in the near future significant? What that look like? And if our revenue is going to increase in the county, are you running a growth factor in population and housing in the county when you look at revenue streams going forward? In other words, the property tax on a given home, and I don't care what scenario you use, is $1,000 a year. And is going forward, it really doesn't increase a lot. Maybe in 3 years or so, it looks like it would be $1,200. But that's not a significant increase totally in the county as far as tax revenue to keep up, I don't think, with what's going on in costs and what the county's doing. So are you running a scenario where today we have 38,000 people and 5 years from now we have 50,000 or 40,000 or whatever that number is?
To answer your last question first, no. This model is static for population, and some of your revenues are generated population-based, like some of your distributions of your gas tax money for MVH and local road and street. It'll look at road miles, populations, registrations, things like that. We have not done anything on the population side, and I typically have not done that for the fact that we only measure it every 10 years. So as soon as we get that data, it kind of resets itself based on the state estimates. But you're right, we would not be addressing any of that type of growth that will add to the income tax base other than the 3% growth that I've put forward in there. Or we have looked at the assessed value growth based on history. And part of that would be driven by those people who have located here and have improved their homes, built new homes, and continue to drive that assessed value forward. But
The assessed value doesn't change the revenue.
the assessed value changes the revenue in the CCD fund only. Otherwise, it just changes the rate. Yes. But to go back to your first question on the tax impacts, remember in these models, they reflect what the legislature did a year ago to address this increase in assessments. So the 2024 amount, you first, on your homestead, you get a $48,000 deduction to the assessed value. Then you get what used to be 35% of the remainder. For 24, it's 40% of the remainder to reduce your assessed value. In 25, it's going to be 37 and a half, and then in 26, if they don't change it, it's supposed to go back to 35. That's what's reflected here, so that's part of that movement you see in increasing cost per this $250,000 residence or $350,000 residence. There is a lot of talk at the legislature about massive overhauls to the property tax system. You know, they did a tweak on the growth factor to the maximum levy. They capped it this last time at 4% because of all these huge assessment increases that we had in the previous years. That amount would have been, I think, 6 or something. So if they just nibble around the edges, I think they'll continue to hold down your maximum levy at a 4% or 4.5% or 5%, whatever they deem they can get away with. But if they take a really big stab at it, it's hard to say what they'll do. Their historical path in the last 15 to 20 years has been to push local income tax to your level in order to get away from property tax somewhat. So if they continue that mantra, I would think potentially they take away your property tax ability and force you into a revenue situation where you all become the scapegoats to implementing more income taxes rather than the legislature saying, we didn't do it, we just gave you the authority to do what you need to do. So that's I don't think they will leave you without a solution. It may not be the solution you want.
That's what I'm
And they may force you into the implementation of it by starving you out from property tax revenue, but, that'll be the hand that you're dealt, would be my guess.
We have several big ticket items. Our balance looks good, seems good, like you say, without a recession, but we have the jail, the courthouse. We've done a wage study, which we're going to have to deal with. The RDC wants $500,000. Child Care Center wants $125,000 for 5 years. And I still think we're paying Ivy Tech $100,000 a year. So we're paying on that in the past. So these are big ticket items, that we're going to have to really watch. Where do you think we're at as far as putting all those together and the needs of what they want to do and what we can do?
Under this model, I think you could do all of those. Capital, again, doesn't worry me because we can always go get capital money if you need to and pay it back with income tax or property tax over time. The thing that scares me the most would be that salary increase. If you have to jump up $1.1 million in this model, it's going to be operational and going forward for perpetuity. That's a scary one.
And they'll be in here a little bit later to speak on that as well. Our study has been complete, and they're going to come in and give a discussion on that and give their impression on what we're going to have to do. So you're welcome to stay for that here shortly. So hopefully we can tie all this in and thread the needle.
Yeah, and again, like I say, under this revenue model, no recession, I think all that stuff fits. But it does scare me to go up that much or that much all at one time.
And that might not happen. It may be a stepped-in, phased-in model.
I think that would be a more prudent position to take so that you can gauge that as you go forward because, as you're all well aware, the biggest majority of all your expenditures are personal services. That's just the nature of government. So as you commit to those, the only way to get those back down is to stop giving raises and stop filling positions. Rarely do we ever get into a position in government where we actually fire people. We just stop giving raises and stop hiring people, and hopefully that we catch up.
But to be able to maintain and keep the people, we have to be able to pay them, and we're changing some of the way we're doing some of the raises, longevity. We're hoping that's what we'll do, so. But
Yeah,
we've got to take care of the people too.
It's a tough balancing act, yeah, because the people want services, people don't want to pay taxes. Those two don't go together.
Right.
You know, first and foremost, you have to know where you're at before you make any business decisions. First and foremost, you need to know where you're at to make business decisions, and Jeff coming on board is giving us the tools and the spreadsheets and everything to make those decisions. Gary, we're either thinking exactly alike, scary, I don't know what to think about that, but, you know, it is not Jeff's job to tell us what the revenue increase potential is, but that's what we're investing, $500,000, you know, all the stuff in the RDC. Outside of that, you know, I think that honestly is the next step. The council needs to have some help in putting a revenue projection together. Exactly what Gary said, you know, everything we're doing is to increase the population. What's that gonna do if 3,000, 5,000 people come here? You know, you're gonna have I've also heard you, Gary, say you got an offset, you know, your services can provide for so many more people, but when that tipping point, when 10,000 come, now we're spending more on services. So, you know, but you need to know that. In my opinion, you need to know that. If this county did not have the potential to grow, that would be a completely different conversation. I'd be right there with Brett on, you know, let's hold this together and try to ride out this recession coming, but that is exactly the opposite of what the opportunity this community has. So, anyway, thank you for everything you do, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
You need to get up and give a speech.
So what the numbers help me understand is, I think it'll help us better understand what our cash position is. So when we're looking at, you know, the RDC money, you know, that's not an ongoing thing. That's, boom, we can do that. You know, the Early Learning Center, again, we can allocate that from cash, you know, think about 5 years at a time. Okay, takes care of that. Same with the jail, so we can utilize, you know, those funds to take care of that. Now we're down to, you know, where are we on the salary increase? And, you know, Gary always likes the rainy day fund. I think it's important that we, you know, take a look at that as well, so to sock some away. So that's what these numbers help me, you know, this year, like I say, as John says, to make our decisions. So I think it's, you know, it's a big help.
Sure, we're in a lot better position
Yeah.
to be able to do these things. And a lot's going on, but we just need to, like he says, just in case of we got to have in the back of our mind, if something goes the other way, we got to have Plan B. That's
I
to be
assume
ready.
you can run a scenario that shows if we allocate some of these cash and then make an assumption of, I don't know, something on the salary, you know, increase, and run that scenario, see what it looks like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that you either do that as part of your staged implementation,
Yeah.
or you just wait based on what we have today, say, hey, we're going to stage it in these factors, and we can build it into the next model and deliver it in the spring. Or like I say, we can do it immediately if that's what you need to make that decision to the 25 budget.
Okay, thanks.
So any further questions on the fiscal plan or that part? If not, jump on to the courthouse funding. Courthouse funding is in process. One of the discussions that we have put off until now that we need to talk about is, in the fiscal plan, I built it in under its normal model, which would be anything that you fund with property tax bonds cannot be outstanding for more than 20 years by the statute. So that gives us about 19 years of amortization. That is worked into the model that you have before you with the assumptions, the assumed assessed value, and those are on page 15. So if you fund it across that 19-year period, which is what the documents basically provide for, you would see likely, if assessed value grows for 2025, et cetera, you would see a slight decrease in the county's overall tax rate. So the question I have for you today is, would you like to try and maintain the 24 tax rate, which was 0.5078, because you're anticipated to fall down below that to about 0.4953. Would you like to try and maintain the 24 tax rate of 0.5078, or would you like to try and maintain the 23 tax rate, which was 0.5340? If you were to raise those property tax rates, you would generate more property tax dollars to make those payments, and then you could shorten this amortization from 9 years to either 7 years or 3 years. The interest savings to that is shrinking it to 7 years and implementing the 24 rate would save you about $1.56 million across that debt. For a $250,000 homestead, that'd be about $12 for the year, so about $1 a month. If you were to implement the 23 rate at that 0.534, we would expect you to save a little over $2 million in interest. The impact to that $250,000 homestead would be about $36 for the year, or about $3 a month. There's no wrong answer here. It's a policy decision from you as the fiscal body as to whether you would raise more property taxes in the short run, get rid of that debt faster and save interest, or amortize it across the normal 19-year period. The useful life of the courthouse remodel, I'm assuming, is going to be far in excess of 20 years that you're going to refund it or refinance it over. We would like to, timing-wise, bond council wants the final budget August the 16th based on bids that should come in early August, and we are going to ask for a rating like August the 19th. So I would prefer to know what that kind of looks like here within the next month. I don't know if you want to wait till if you're prepared to have a discussion and make a decision, or whether you want to wait for this next meeting on August the 13th.
Just clarification, so the current tax rate with the jail bond is what? Is it the 0.55?
Just the jail bond, or all the county's rates?
It's the jail bond, because that's what's coming
Okay.
off, right?
I was looking at all the rates combined.
Oh, okay.
We can look at that. Okay, so just the jail bond, which is the lease rental fund, 0283. For 2024, it's 0.0359, but that has fallen off as you're getting into the final payment amounts, where the cash reserve is going to be used to fund it. In 23, that rate was 0.0460, and in 22, it was 0.0530.
Okay. So,
But overall tax rate wise, your 24 rate is 0.5078 for all your funds combined. And that's down from your 23 rate, which was 0.5340. And that was when you implemented your additional levy for EMS services outside of Union Township. And when we did that, your rate was at about 48 cents. We thought it was going to be about a 10-cent increase, so we thought it was going to be about 58 cents. It ended up only being 53.4 because of the big increase in assessed value we saw based on home values, et cetera.
So if we don't increase the tax rate, what's that equate to as far as an amortization for the courthouse?
It'd be probably about, well, if you just let it go with the 19 years, it's gonna fall from .5078 to, I think, about 49.5 cents.
Okay, but if we left it at the .5078,
To hold it at
Yeah, seven.
.5078,
it's 7,
it would cut it to 7 years of
Yeah.
amortization, save you about $1.5 million in interest. And that would be a difference in tax rate to a $250,000 homestead of about $12 for the year, $1 a
Yeah.
month.
okay, I'm good, thanks.
And then that would open it up for future. I mean, we've got future things coming, and the quicker we get the bond paid off, that would give us the opportunity to have a bond in a lot less amount of time.
This one, yeah, this one's gonna be done as a lease. So in a lease scenario, you have no ceiling.
Okay?
We have a general obligation bond cap, which you all utilized almost fully to do some of the temper projects. That amount, if you pay it down quicker, gives you ability to issue more general obligation bonds. But lease rental bonds, it's basically whatever you need. You can go out, levy taxes in order to do that. These transactions are a little more lengthy and a little more expensive, though, because you have to have the building corporation and some other documentation and stuff in process. But if you're looking at tax rate policy, yes, this would
Yeah.
flip that over
Yeah.
quicker and give you the same tax rate to address a new problem 7 years from now,
And save $1 million.
and save $1.5 million.
Yeah. All right. David, what do you think?
I guess looking at this side, I guess my personal preference would be to maintain the 24 rate, do it in 7 years and get it off the rolls as soon as possible. I mean, obviously we can do it quicker, but that is a bigger tax increase, which I don't think we have an appetite for right now. I think 19 years, obviously, I think is too long.
Yeah.
Especially if we're talking about a potential redo of different areas in the courthouse at some point in future years. So the 7-year plan, I guess, makes sense to me right now. That's just my opinion. There's 7 other opinions here, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll make a motion, we go with the 24. And get it paid off in 7 years and save $1.5 million.
Okay. We have a motion to, I guess, utilize the current tax rate of .5078 in order to amortize this out for 7 years, to utilize the savings as well as prevent a further increase in property taxes. We have a second? Any other questions or discussions on that? Yep.
When you're putting all this together, and we're talking about these rates and what the tax rate's gonna be and how quick we're gonna pay this off, I look at this graph, and I'm kind of a visual person. Page 39. This green line on the bottom is ending capital, and the one in the middle is expenditures, and the one on top is revenue. It looks to me like our ending capital is gonna exceed our revenue within just a few years at this rate.
But that does not address any of the operational changes that you might make for salaries, any other cash expenditures that you might fund fully with a project.
Yeah, well, that was getting to that. That was,
Yeah, that is without those worked in yet. So that will,
our tax rate may not go up that much unless we want to flatten this, if we want to flatten this line. There comes a point when we've got enough ending cash balance in the account.
yes, and you're beyond that at this point, and that's why I'm saying use cash for the jail
Rather than-
projects.
Rather than going to the well and say, we need this money, that flatten this line and say, we're going to maintain this, but we don't need to increase it. And that would net a tax decrease or a revenue decrease from the taxpayer. You might
You could theoretically get to that point, But what we typically find in government is you have so many other
We always find
deferred
someplace to
capital
spend it.
maintenance. Well, it's not so much spending it, it's that you have this giant glut of unaddressed projects. That when you see that cash balance start to get to that level, you're gonna say, oh, we really need to do that. Let's not bond for it. Let's pay cash for this one. Let's pay cash for that one. Which would be a good position to be in, because you can respond quicker. You don't have the finance costs. You don't have the interest costs. One caveat on the discussion. These are based on the assumptions of the fiscal plan. We should have a new assessed value number August 1. Does that sound about right? I think we're going to get a new AV number August 1? Yes. Okay. So we will obviously use that number in addressing this. I assume it's still going to be the 7-year number. It's just going to be tweaked a little bit. But that number will change based on whatever the 25 assessed value is. We'll try and peg it to the rate.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions for Jeff real quick? All right, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have Resolution 2024-5 for the transfer of funds to the RDC. Is this 6?
Yes, so you, last month you voted to appropriate this $500,000. This money it's unappropriated, so it's a two-step process here. This resolution would reaffirm your appropriation of that money into the general fund, and then, in order for it to get to the RDC, it has to be transferred from the general fund to the RDC fund. Fund-to-fund, excuse me, fund-to-fund transfers require your approval. So this resolution merely reflects what you intended, but we have to do two things. We have to formally appropriate it to the general fund, transfer it to the RDC, and then appropriate it to the RDC non-TIF revenue fund. If, when we get into an audit, they're going to ask Mindy where the resolution is that authorized the transfer of fund to fund. And so this resolution is really simply memorializing what you did last time in a formal way. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so the first step is the resolution, 2024-5. Is that not drafted yet, or I don't have a copy of that? I've only got 6, 7, and 8.
It's drafted. If you didn't have it, it should be in the packet.
Oh, is it in the packet? Okay.
If not, we'll go grab it for you.
I didn't see it, but I got it on papers.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I do not see it. I've got, here's 24, 6, 7, 8.
I have it. Well, yeah. Jen, you'll take over?
Okay. So resolution 2024-5 to transfer the funds from the RDC, and then we'll do an additional appropriation step if the resolution passes. So I'll entertain a motion. We need a motion to pass resolution 2024-5, which is the resolution to. Yeah.
Did he make a motion?
Okay. We have a motion and a second
Okay.
for resolution 2024-5, which authorizes the transfer of funds to the RDC and the appropriation of funds. Any other questions or discussion on that part? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now the next step is we do the additional appropriation? You just did all that. That resolution. Oh, the whole thing does everything, okay. Okay, well, I just saw it here on mine. Okay. Well, never mind. So we're good. The second step is done. So we're moving on to, we've got some tax abatement compliance resolutions, which are the ones I was confused by here. So this is a yearly item that we monitor the current tax abatements out there. These are on Nucor, and, hang on. Last page. Yeah, okay. So Resolution 2024-6 is Montgomery County Compliance Crawfordsville 5 Solar Array LLC. 2024-7 is compliance of the Darlington Solar Array. And then 2024-8 is compliance of Steel Technologies with the statement of benefits for real estate. Yeah, so that says Nucor. Is there a Nucor one as well? Okay, in my notes here it says that, so. So Steel Technologies, Darlington Solar, and Crawfordsville Solar.
These have all come in and applied and are in compliance, I take it.
Right, each of these three taxpayers have submitted as Form CF1, which is a compliance statement with personal property abatement that you have granted. They're required every year to come in and show you how many people they've hired, what their payroll is. Your job is to see whether they are substantially compliant with what they represented to you. So the solar array, as you know, pardon me? Well, no, it's a tax, yeah, there was a pilot, but you have a tax abatement is all we're considering today, yeah. It was completed in 2020, so they're about halfway through their process. Darlington was in 2019 project, so they're a little over halfway through. And then Steel Technologies, which has been, it was a 2017, they're well over halfway done with theirs. But they submitted the forms, the auditor has examined those, I've examined those, and this is just the annual review so that they remain eligible for their tax abatement is all this is. So these resolutions simply find each taxpayer is in substantial compliance with what they represented to you. Nucor, I'll just explain. There's an exception to this annual review for when the capital investment is very, very large. Nucor's exceeded 30 million, so they don't have to come back every year under the law with you. And again, we know from looking at their information, particularly Jeff Peters and I spent a lot of time talking about this for the TIF, that their investment exceeds the amount which requires them to come in every year. So this is something we do every year. We expect to receive a couple more of these. You have a couple other abatements out there. But usually we do this in May or June. They were submitted a little later this year. So we'd ask you to approve all three.
Okay, any other questions for Dan? I'll entertain a motion for those,
I move approval.
okay, for all three?
Yes.
Okay. A motion and a second to approve all three compliance resolutions. Any other questions or discussions? Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Is there four?
No, we're just, Steel Technologies, Darlington, and Crawfordsville. He was saying Nucor is not
Okay.
part of that. The resolutions are, just for the record, 2024, 6, 7, and 8. Those were the ones I read off, so. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then the 2025 budget calendar review again, so Mindy or Dan or whoever.
Tom asked me to put together the 2025 budget timeline, so you should all have in your packet a copy of that. Once we get through this, department heads, I will also send this out to you at the end of the meeting. So the major things, I won't read through the whole thing. We are still waiting on some budgets from department heads. You will also, those who haven't turned those in, I will get an email sent out to you. Later today, we have turned off the budget module, so you won't be able to enter anything yourself right now. The main things, somebody took my copy. Did you take my copy? Main things I want to point out, first thing is our budget workshop with the state has been scheduled for July 30th. It's going to be at 11:30 in the morning. You are all invited to that, as well as the commissioners. So put that on your calendar. I'll be sending out an invite. So we do have our budget workshop. It'll be with Sam Vanderveen at the state, and it is online now. It's no longer in person. The next thing that we should look at is the budget presentation. At the meeting in August, I will be presenting what's been submitted to us for us to review. And then you, the council, are responsible for making a written recommendation of the tax levy limits and estimated reductions, and we'll put something together. We do this every year, and I will send it out to all the taxing units. So you just have to make your recommendations, and I'll get that sent out. After we present the budgets at the August meeting, in between that and the department head presentations that we have scheduled for 8/26 and 8/27. That's a Monday and a Tuesday. Those will be at 6 p.m. So in between the presentation on 8/13 and the department head presentation starting on 8/26, the council is responsible, the liaisons are responsible to get with their departments and discuss those individual budgets. So after that, the September meeting will be our official public hearing. We will also have the public hearing for the units that are subject to binding reviews. I think we have a library or something. After the September meeting, the adoption hearing is scheduled for the October meeting. And providing it's adopted in October, it'll be back to our office to get that submitted to the state, and then we should hear back from the state because we are taking out new levies this year. Looks like the DLGF has till January 15th to approve that, but if everything goes right, we'll present in August, have the hearing in September, the adoption in October, and then the department heads will present, obviously, on the 8/26 and 8/27 meeting.
Any questions on the budget calendar coming up? All right. Moving on. Probably what everybody's waiting for is the compensation study. Do we have our representative here, Brett? Okay. Come on up.
Hey, David, this is Addie and Kent.
Okay. So you've kind of led this charge, so
Yeah.
if you want to do introductions or go right
Yeah.
ahead. Good morning, thank you. So this study was our first, I guess, in my eyes, our first step to figuring out a better, more fair way to pay our employees with less confusion amongst everybody with the current matrix system that's gotten all out of whack in the last few years. So I know Brett, Steve, and Jake have kind of been leading this working group, so if you guys have anything to say, or we'll just turn over to our, so, go right ahead.
Good morning. I'm Ken Irwin. I'm with Wagner, Irwin, Shealy and Associates. I'm here with Addie Rooker, our principal consultant, who was our team leader on this study. As you may recall, back in November, we had a briefing meeting with all the elected officials and department heads to put this study in motion, which we've now bringing to you the final report and the results of that analysis. So there's a lot here to digest. I'm sure that you'll have questions, and we'll be going over a report that's part of your packet. And then there's a number of spreadsheets that Addie will cover regarding the analysis. Just kind of briefly, we'll skip through the report first, talking about the primary responsibility of our work in terms of what we have been engaged to do, and the objectives of the study being to prepare a new set of job descriptions for all the county positions. Secondly, conducting a Fair Labor Standards Act analysis of the classifications for wage and hour purposes, particularly the exempt, non-exempt, and excluded status. There's some new rules that are coming into play already here in July 1st and again in January, which we'll be talking about in a little more detail. We have used what's called the factor evaluation system of job classification to serve as a foundation for classifying the positions. Briefly, this system is a public sector system that was developed by the Department of Labor. It was installed by the state of Indiana back during Governor Bowen's administration. Still in place today. It's been modified and adapted for use for most counties, city governments throughout the state who've classified their positions. Inasmuch as it is a public sector system, it separates jobs into job categories where you can only compare like jobs with one another, which I'll talk about here a little bit more in this report. After classifying the jobs, then we've looked at the internal pay, the pay that you have now in your pay schedules to identify any internal pay inequities amongst like jobs within the system. And then finally, we have conducted an external market pay survey to see where the jobs in Montgomery County are paid respective of the external market. The processes involved that kickoff meeting with the department heads, elected officials, November. From that, we distributed questionnaires along with the existing job descriptions to all the employees for updating purposes. Our consultants then contacted and had interviews with all the elected officials and department heads by phone or by Zoom. And from that, we gathered internal information about the organizational structures of each of the departments and offices, identified any issues or pay problems that have existed in the past, and from that point began the process of preparing new job descriptions that were then returned as drafts to all the elected officials, department heads, for their review and sign off, which they did, and they came back to us verifying that they had either been, revised and make these revisions, or they were good as prepared. So we particularly want to thank Tom and Lori for all their work in this whole process, and the department heads and elected officials for staying on a pretty strict timeline. This was something that the committee was pushing when we began, that we got hired on Monday and they wanted the project done on the next Saturday. But after some negotiation, we bent their arms a little bit to try to get the project done in a number of months. So this has really been kind of a textbook project. Your committee has worked well in terms of being a checkpoint for us and staying on top of the workflow and having an understanding of where we were in the process and addressing those issues that the council wanted addressed throughout the process. Once we had the job descriptions finalized from the department heads, we then had our factor team go through and we point factored every job in the classification using the FES guide charts by job category. And at that point, we're able then to take the next step, the final steps, and do a salary analysis both internally and externally. We have restated the process, or the Indiana code that provides council with the responsibility for setting pay schedules, the number of employees, describing classifying jobs, hiring and contracting with persons such as us to help in that process. So you have taken on that responsibility and pretty well followed what's set out in Indiana code respective of job classification and compensation studies. On page 3 and 4, there's a description here of the factor evaluation system and how we go about installing the system. And those steps that I mentioned are stated here. All the job descriptions are prepared in the same fashion. They all begin with a series of job duties, followed by job requirements, skills, knowledges, difficulty of work, responsibility, personal work relationships, physical effort, and work environment. Those are all factors as part of a job description, and there are statements in the job descriptions that, taken from the questionnaire, from the drafts, and from the discussion with the elected official, that are used to determine a level of setting points for each one of those factors to end up with a total number of points for each job. So besides the use of these job descriptions for setting pay, they're also intended as a base document for elected officials and department heads to use for hiring purposes, posting purposes, for performance evaluations, for looking at making an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Family and Medical Leave Act, workers' comp claims. They have a lot of utility other than just looking at them for pay purposes. And we've brought the final descriptions today, and they'll be available then for each of the department heads to have. And it's one of the first steps we recommend council take in terms of adopting the descriptions as the official descriptions of the county. The job categories are defined on page 4 and 5. Comet, computer office machine operation technician jobs. These are support positions. Examples of those jobs in the county are records clerk, assistant court secretaries, the court reporters. There's a number of jobs in the various office and departments that have jobs that are in this group. Labor, trades, and craft jobs are concentrated in the highway department with truck drivers and mechanics. You do have some other labor, trades, and craft jobs in some other places like maintenance and custodians, but principally they're concentrated in the highway department. Then there's a group called Pole Protective Occupations and Law Enforcement. And these are the jobs in the sheriff's department. And we have a breakout here with the pole positions, two groups, one being the merit police, the second being all the other, what we call the civilian pole, be correction officers and other jobs that would fall within the protection occupations and law enforcement. Then there's a third group called PAT, Professional Administrative and Technological Jobs. These are jobs that normally require some advanced knowledge learning through attainment of a degree or equivalent training and experience. Some of the jobs that you have in PAT are your GIS technicians, environmental health specialist, emergency management director. These are jobs that are in the PAT category here in your county. Finally, we've got an executive group of jobs, which kind of is at the top end of the PAT, or an extension of the PAT group, but these are the department head level positions that are held by people who are in charge of the departments of the county. Lastly, we have a separate set of jobs that we call special occupations. They're there for various reasons. You do have jobs like probation officers that they would fall under PAT, but under the fact that you've got the judicial conference pay schedule that it's mandated you pay, we pull them out of PAT and set them aside as a special occupation. Chief deputies that are appointed by the elected officials are part of another group of the special occupations. We have some separation here for some of the prosecutors and public defenders. So Addie will talk about those groups as we move through the spreadsheets. Determining the evaluations, I've already mentioned this, but this is more detail on page 7 and 8 about how the points are assigned to the positions, and what we're looking at as we determine the levels and the point values in using those guide charts. On page 8, these are the breakdowns of classification levels by point breaks after we factored all the jobs by category. So you'll see in Comet, there are Comet A through E with the point values that are the point spreads for each one. Excuse me. Same principle applies to the labor, trades, and crafts, the merit poll, and the next page. Civilian poll, PAT, and executive. Now, in this system, unlike some other systems, you can only pair like jobs with one another. So you can't compare a truck driver to a police officer. They're in two different job categories. And this is kind of the foundation of the system. So the system it's built in to where you can only make those comparisons of like jobs. And I think that has been the success and the longevity of the system that it's had in the use here in Indiana. I'm wild guess, but I think it's close. There's probably 60 counties that have adopted this system. There's that many cities and towns. It's got a lot of utility. So there's built-in comparative information where you can make these comparisons to other employers. Now, taking a look at the internal findings and recommendations, we've listed out what the President mentioned, your current system. You've got this series and grade system, and we have spelled it out there. And under your system, new hires are paid at a base rate for the position, then employees receive a base rate based upon a longevity matrix that accounts for the number of years' service. Employees that transfer from a similar position are allowed to carry their year's service to another position. It was reported that by the county has allowed a few adjustments to a position's base salary where existing employees have been able to have their actual salary adjusted based on year service. The use of this longevity matrix is absent a written defined policy. Well, it was one of these, this is the way we've always done it. Well, where is it? How does it work? Well, we don't know, and we had a number of department heads that have told us, and I know Addie talked to someone last week, says, if you can figure out this system, you deserve a raise. And then she came in and obviously wanted a raise, after she figured this system out. But the current structure, we found to be confusing and having difficulty in making a defensive basis for determining one salary from the next, other than I think mine belongs here because so-and-so's over here said theirs was. So I want mine there as well, which makes, without any system, that's obviously the only thing left to do. But what we envision is you're implementing a new system and kind of setting aside this old system, this old whatever it was system, and installing a new system based upon the classification, so you have set a foundation for establishing base rates of pay, and then from there, building out by choice. There's a lot of options the council has in the way you use the system. And we've costed some of that out. There may be some other options that you'll want to cost out yourselves, and you'll see that on the spreadsheets as we go through them. So we've point factored all the positions by category, and that will provide you with that option. We've also developed a proposed longevity pay option, which is tied to individual service with the county, so that the senior employees aren't being paid the same amount as someone that is hired new in the same job. So it would allow for some additional compensation as an add-on to longevity pay, not rolled into the base. And that's the one thing we would caution, so that we keep the base salary solid. Any add-ons then go away. If you hire a new person, then they're not inheriting part of that longevity salary if it were to be rolled into the base. So our recommendation is that we keep it separate and paid out that way. So we've given some options here on page 11 based upon year service and what that would cost if implemented. We've also developed, and Addie can speak to this in a little more detail, a tiered compensation system for some of the CDL people and some minimum experience for truck drivers, and trying to maintain and recruit qualified truck drivers with CDLs. Likewise, the deputy prosecutors and public defenders, we've developed a tier system there that, again, is designed to provide some flexibility to the prosecutor and public defenders to set pay based upon experience of attorneys' knowledge, so that we can, again, hire people that can perform the job, and we can be competitive with what some of the rates are being paid to these jobs that are in high demand and short supply. We've also identified some pay compression issues in the comment group, looked at the relationship between the elected official down to the chief deputy, down to those being supervised and the compression. So we're looking to provide you with some options there on making some adjustments based upon, or dealing with that to eliminate some of this pay compression within that category. Pay policy recommendations regarding high outlier jobs, those would be beyond what's in the level for the job, so that you have a choice there, obviously. You can freeze the salary. We're not recommending any salaries be cut, but that you do have some other choices to deal with that. But if you were to have a policy where once that person leaves the job, then the new hire would come in at the base salary instead of inheriting the higher salary of the person who's left. And you may look at cost of living adjustments for those high outliers separate, or some kind of an add-on pay or a stipend, so that, and the longevity obviously would be an add-on that they would be eligible for if you were to adopt that longevity add-on option. And pay assigned to the positions. Pay is assigned to the position, not the employee. So it's the job and not the person. We're not giving somebody, $50,000 in one job, and if they want to transfer and take a job down the hall, they don't get to take their salary with them if that job is higher or lower. They're going to be paid at that job salary, not what they had been making in the past. Then on page 13, we have restated the definitions under the Fair Labor Standards Act that sets out that jobs be designated or classified either as excluded, exempt, or non-exempt. Excluded positions include elected officials and their policy-making appointees, their personal staff, and legal advisors. These employees are not covered by the FLSA and are not eligible or entitled to receive overtime or comp time. Very small group. Now, you have some jobs then are classified as exempt, and these are jobs that meet one of the tests under the FLSA, which we have provided below those tests. There's an executive test, excuse me. There's a professional test, and there's an administrative test. We looked at all the jobs that we had in the classification and made a recommendation to classify the jobs into one of the three categories. Non-exempt jobs, those are the jobs that are not meeting any of the tests, that have to be paid overtime at time and a half for any hours they work over 40 in a work week. And most of your jobs fall within that non-exempt category. But in order to meet the exempt status, you have to be paid, now you have to be paid at a threshold salary. And it went up to $43,888 a year effective July the 1st. And it's going up again in January to $58,000, January 1st. That's a threshold salary. So the question then becomes one, if it's below the threshold, do we let it revert to a non-exempt position and pay overtime or comp time? Or if we do the calculation and presume that that salary it's really going to go up beyond that rate if we pay overtime, then we may want to make that adjustment to the higher threshold. So there's going to be some choice for council to make here in terms of how you look at these exempt positions that are currently paid either below the January or July rate, or those that are paid also would be paid below the rate in January. On page 14 and 15, we have stated here what the new rules are that well, the rules were issued back in April and became effective in July. And there's the chart here that shows you the phase-in amounts for each one of the categories. So we're recommending that with the jobs as we know them here, that you have certain jobs that would be classified as excluded, being the elected officials, chief deputy, the matron, and the health officer. And all those are born in statute, particularly the chief deputies being politically appointed positions, as well as a matron being an appointive position under the statute for the sheriff. Then we have listed out the positions that would be recommended as being exempt under the FLSA, and there's a fairly lengthy list there. And then on page 16 are positions from the exempt list that would be below currently the $43,888. I'm sorry. There's one that falls below that. So you've got one that you would have to make an adjustment to bring it up. All the others are currently above that threshold. The external analysis, we conducted an external salary survey of all the counties and cities that are listed here on page 16. We also have supplemental salary information that we've collected from other sources, as well as maintaining a database. And that is what has been used to develop an external salary line for each of the job categories. And that salary line is a regression of salary data collected representing employers' salaries from all entities surveyed and the data that we have. And we use the middle 80% of the data. So we're not comparing it to, we lop off the highest 10, we lop off the lowest 10. So we're looking at the middle 80% when we're making recommendations for midpoint adjustments or low to high ranges. So again, Addie can explain that a little bit as we go through the spreadsheets, and I think it'll become more obvious. Then there are some basic terms that we use here, and it's part of the, I think, the way of communicating, so we're all kind of speaking the same language. Internal pay equity is the relationship of pay within the county. External pay equity is that with externally with other employers in the external market. Where do we want to be? Longevity pay is pay based upon employees' tenure with the county. Tech pay is a supplemental stipend. You've got some in the sheriff's department for some specialties that get tech pay. And performance pay is pay for employee performance, where you're doing evaluations and tying pay to that. That, in our view, is kind of the icing on the cake. You need the cake first. You need to bake the cake. You need to have a cake before you start jumping it to the top. So the cake being the classification system, its structure, the job descriptions, and looking at where you are internally, externally, before you go there. So the intention here is for you to take in this data, this information, you've got a lot of information to digest and to use it as a guideline as you work through your budget hearings. The next steps would be adopting the job descriptions, adopting the classification system, adopting a maintenance procedure and a plan to maintain the system, which we've provided you with a draft of a maintenance program so that you can keep the system ongoing through time. New jobs are added to the system. They're added in the same fashion as were these jobs that were classified. New job descriptions factored, put into the system, slotted based upon the rate for your pay schedule. So that in a nutshell is where we are. We're available going forward to help you is however you need us in the implementation stage. So with that, I'll let Addie go through these spreadsheets with you.
Thanks, Kent. Good morning. All right, I'm going to start with the LTC group. And first, I'll just kind of explain how these are set up. And most of the spreadsheets are set up in the same format. So if you look across the top, the columns going across, we have the department, the position, job title, the hire date for the individual in the position, the job classification for the job category, so whether it's A, B, C, or so on, the recommended FLSA status, the 2024 actual salary and the hourly rate, and then the annual work hours for that position. And then the next two columns are the longevity pay option. So that we have a column here that has the years of service based on their hire date that was provided, and then the longevity pay, and that was in the report of how that, the 6 different levels in the increments of pay. Then the next two columns are the internal analysis. So this is comparing the your current pay to the factored positions and looking at any internal pay equity issues. So we have developed an internal pay line, so a base salary to correct any internal pay discrepancies that may exist. And then the next 6 columns, those are the external salary analysis. So the external midpoint salary, that is the average of the data collected. So that's your external pay line. And then the external low salary is 10% below the external midpoint, and then the external high is set at 10% above the external midpoint. So that's how we've developed those points and that external salary range. And then the last 2 columns are your cost analysis. So for the LTCs, we've provided a cost to move each position to the internal base salary as well as to the external midpoint. So for the LTC positions, you have 7 classification levels. There are a total of 41 LTC positions here in Montgomery County. For the truck drivers in LTCC, I did work closely with the superintendent to develop the different levels, and those were spelled out here in the, let me find the right page here, sorry. So level 1 is a higher end, so it's a non-CDL. It was reported that we're having trouble getting and recruiting those positions, so trying to get someone in with a non-CDL and earning that, working their way to earn that CDL. So, and then the requirement would be they must obtain the CDL within 1 year of hire. And then level 2 would be a bump in pay. So we have each bump to the level would be at $1,000 increment increase. So level 2, possession of a CDL and less of 3 years of experience as a truck driver. Level 3, a minimum of 3 years experience as a truck driver with a CDL Class B. Level 4 is a minimum of 5 years of experience as a truck driver with a CDL Class B. and then 5 being the highest level, a minimum of 10 years' experience as a truck driver with a Class B CDL. So when looking at the data, I'll just walk you kind of across so, just to make sure everyone follows the flow of the spreadsheet. So LTCA, we have a jail cook, and the internal base salary for that position was established at $36,869. The actual salary for that position was $33,717. So then if you look at the far end, we've cost that out. The cost to move that position to the internal base was $3,152. Then comparing this position to the external market, the external midpoint was $39,843. And again, if you subtract the current salary, the cost to move that position to the external midpoint was $6,126. 22 of the 41 positions are currently below the internal base salary. While that sounds like a large number of those, it results only in a 2.77% increase to move all those positions to the internal base. Yes, it's located in the right-hand corner down at the bottom for the cost analysis. 10 positions in LTC fall below the external low salary. So the majority of the positions are within the range there. 28 positions fall below the external midpoint salary. To move all the positions, all the LTC positions to the external midpoint would be a 7.12% increase over your current salaries. I do want to point out that there are 2 proposed positions in the LTC category. One was for the maintenance department up in LTCA. This was a custodian, a part-time custodian position. So a job description was prepared, it was classified, and a salary is provided. If the council does approve that position, everything is in place for that position to move forward. The same with the highway foreman position in LTCF. If that position is to be approved by council, then we have a job description and a classification already set in place for that position. The total longevity cost here for the LTCs was $54,000. Any questions with the LTC group? The Class A?
Yeah, we didn't include Class A or tanker endorsements in those. Those are very rare to use, so wasn't a super priority. So you guys recommend overloading on Class A? Yeah, they do. But we don't use it every day like we do Class B. So you don't have a job description for Class A, is that what you're saying? They would just fall under a truck driver, the same.
Yeah, there's one job description, and then they, for the truck drivers, and then as they build the level and the experience, then they would move up on those different pay levels. Any other questions there with LTC? Okay, if we could go to the comment page, please. So the comment group is formatted the same way as the LTCs. This is a larger group. We have 55 comment positions, 5 comment classification levels. 36 of the 55 comment positions fall below the internal base salary. So here is where we found this category, quite a few internal pay discrepancies. So this internal base, we're hoping that will correct those. So just for example, in comment B, you have positions ranging in salary from $29,500 to $48,798. In comment C, you have positions ranging from $31,955 to $51,401. Comment D, positions range from 35,142 to 60,797. And in comment E, positions range from 35,352 to 53,638. So again, we believe this is the result of that embedded longevity that has happened over time and created these internal pay discrepancies. So as Kent mentioned, again, we're not recommending any pay cuts for those that are identified as high outliers, but we are trying to look to move, the recommendation would be to look at those positions that are below those internal bases to try to correct those internal pay equities. Overall, it would be a 6.77% increase to move all the comment positions to the internal base. And that's listed on the bottom of the second page in the right-hand corner. 37 comment positions fall below the external low salary. And then 40 of the 55 positions fall below the external midpoint salary. So overall, the comment positions significantly lag behind in the external market by 16.39%. That's the second highest out of all the job categories for Montgomery County. The total longevity cost for the comment positions is $52,500. And there was one proposed position in the comment group, and that is in comment A, and that is the scanning deputy in the clerk's office. It's a part-time position. Any questions on the comment group?
I just want to make a quick comment. For everybody wanting me to make that bigger, if I make it bigger, you're going to lose one side or the other. So just so you know, that's the reason I'm not expanding it.
Okay, the next group will be the merit pool. So here we have 4 classification levels, and there are 27 merit pool positions. So this spreadsheet is set up just a little bit differently. We do have the longevity pay option, but because of the internal base pay already established by the rank, we did not do an internal analysis because they're already internally aligned. But when we were comparing the base salaries to the external market, all of the merit pool positions fall below the external low salary and the external midpoint salary. And this is comparing base salary to base salary. On the spreadsheet, the merit officers, we've listed the base salary as well as their actual salary, which does differ. But that is because they have add-on for different duty pay and add-on like SWAT team and different things that they take on, training officer and those sort of things that are included in their total salary. So for the external analysis, we have the range again with the external midpoint, the low salary, and the high. And then for the cost analysis, we did what it would cost to move all the positions to the external midpoint using their base salary, and then as well as what it would cost if you use their actual salary. So comparing base salary to base salary, it would be a 14.31% increase to move all of the merit positions to the external midpoint. And there is one rank in merit pool C, the lieutenant. That position is currently not filled, but we've left that slot and that rank there in case the sheriff requests to fill that position in the future. And the total longevity cost for the merit positions would be $47,000. Any questions with the merit? Okay, we will move to civilian poll. All right, civilian poll, we have 5 civilian poll classifications. There are a total of 55 civilian poll positions. Here, 25 of the 55 positions fall below the internal base salary. But again, it's only a 2.44% increase to move all those civilian poll positions to the internal base. So overall, that's a minimal adjustment there. Where we saw most of the pay discrepancies and where you'll see those adjustments are in civilian poll B with the jail deputies. The current salaries range from $41,960 to $49,513. So there's roughly a $8,000 difference in pay among those jail deputies doing the same job. In civilian poll C, the dispatchers, they range from $47,730 to $58,113. And then in civilian poll D, the dispatch supervisors, their salaries range from $58,093 to $71,432. So some significant pay discrepancies in positions that are performing the same work. 25 of the civilian poll positions fall below the external low salary, and 38 positions fall below the external midpoint salary. And so overall, the civilian poll positions lag the external market by 8.1%. There is one proposed position here in civilian poll, and that is in civilian poll D for the Public Defender's Office. It's an investigator position. And the total longevity cost for civilian poll would be $44,000. Any questions here with the civilian poll? Yeah, so the years of service here, if you look at the civilian polls, especially in civilian poll B and C, you will see very minimal. Most of the positions or employees have been here, zero, either they're new, 1 year. There's a lot of zeros, a lot of ones, a lot of twos. So the total years of service here reflects the turnover that the sheriff is experiencing in the jail. So in hopes that with some competitive salaries that may help curb, even though it's a tough position regardless. Next will be the PAT category. So here we have 3 PAT classification levels. Thank you. Total of 17 PAT positions. 9 of the positions coming in for an internal pay adjustment. 10 positions fall below the external low salary. And then 13 of the 17 positions fall below the external midpoint salary. Overall, the PAT positions lag the external market by 18.9%, which is the highest percent of all the job categories. There are 2 proposed PAT positions. They're both in PAT A. One is for the mapping. It's the land use research analyst. And then the other is in the building department for assistant inspector code enforcement. So again, we've provided those job descriptions and classifications if those positions are approved by council. And the total longevity cost here for the PAT positions was $19,000. Any questions on the PAT positions? Okay. All right, executive, please. All right, the next group are the executives. So we have the department head level positions. Here we have 3 classification levels, and there are 7 exec positions. Here we focused on the external analysis. These are the positions that are running your department, your operations. So we focused on competitive salaries and not so much the internal analysis here for these. 5 positions fall below the external low salary. And then all of the exec positions fall below the external midpoint. It was a 2.01% adjustment to move all the exec positions to the external low, and then 11.4% increase to move the positions to the external midpoint. And then the total longevity cost for the execs is $13,000. Any questions here on the executives? Then there should be a attorney pay schedule. Okay, so here we have a proposed attorney tier level pay schedule, and this would be for the deputy prosecutors as well as the public defenders. And we've created 4 tier levels of compensation, and then based on the types of cases and experience, have established external midpoint and ranges for those different levels. The level assignments and criteria, we're recommending that they are determined by the prosecutor and chief public defender, but we've set some general guidelines here for an example of what could be established with counsel. And then we have shown what that looks like. There should be an attorney, SO attorney pay plan. Yes, thank you. So here we've got it divided. We have the longevity pay options and then the external salary analysis. So what's a little different here is for each of the deputy prosecutors and the public defenders, we've placed them on a level within that schedule and then shown what that midpoint is and what that corresponding range, external range is, and then the cost to move those positions either to the low of that range or to the external midpoint. And again, those placements would ultimately be up to the recommendation of the prosecutor or the chief public defender, but these at least show you what that would look like for implementation purposes. So to move these positions based on these levels to the external low would be a 2.62% increase, and then to move these positions to the external midpoint would be a 10.73% increase for these attorneys. There is one note, the last deputy prosecutor, that position is currently, that individual is working towards his passing the bar exam. The current salary is $65,000. We've shown what it would be once he passes the salary, or the bar exam. Any questions here on the attorneys? Okay. All right, the next group, there should be just a SO, a plain SO category. Yes, yeah, that one will be here shortly. Thank you. Okay, so this group, so we have several different groups of SOs. So we just did the SO attorneys, special occupations, and then here on this page we have 2 groups. We have the special occupations at the top that are the chief deputies for the assessor, auditor, clerk, recorder, and treasurer. So we have the actual salary and we have the longevity pay options. And then we have 2 pay options here. We surveyed the external midpoint for each of these positions. So these are direct job matches with the counties that were included in the survey. And so that external midpoint reflects that data. And then then what we provided was 85% of the elected officials' external average salary. So you'll see that on the next sheet here in a second. But we've taken what was surveyed for each elected official and tied their pay to that elected official and have costed that out of where that would place them. So again, these positions are very competitive with the external midpoint, but that doesn't really help your pay compression issue to get those positions above the COMET positions they're supervising. So I'm not sure that's a really optimal option for the county. So I think tying it to the percentage is going to get those positions at a higher level to relieve that pay compression issue. So that would be a 3.99% increase. And then the total longevity cost for the chief deputies was $6,000. Then we have a group that's below that, as Kent mentioned in the report. So we have, we did not include the chief deputy sheriff or the chief deputy coroner. The sheriff's salary is set differently than the other elected officials, so we've direct job matched the chief deputy sheriff. And then the chief deputy coroner, because it's a part-time position and a little bit unique, we've direct job matched it as well. And then we have the matron public health nurse, and then the deputy coroners and the health officer. So for the external analysis, we provided the external midpoint for direct job matching these positions, and then the external salary range that would go, again, at a percentage below and above the external midpoint. And then costing that out to move those positions to the external midpoint was a 6.96% increase and $10,000 cost for longevity for that option. And just a note, there is one public health nurse position that's currently not filled, but that position has been approved. Any questions here with this group? Okay, can we go to the elected officials, please? And this one's, sorry, it's probably hard to read again. So this one looks different. This is a salary comparison to the counties that were surveyed. So it has each of the elected officials, so Montgomery County salaries are listed at the top, and then the counties that were surveyed, we've listed their salaries going down. And then at the bottom, we have the average salary, and then we've done a weighted average. So that weighted average was calculated by dropping the highest and the lowest salary for each elected official, and then averaging the remaining salaries. And for the surveyor, the average salary and the weighted average, we've removed the part-time salary for the Park County position, so it wouldn't be skewed. So we've incorporated that, and then we've shown the actual salary range, so from the lowest paid to the highest that was surveyed. And then the last two, we've shown the percent increase for each elected official to move to the average salary and to the weighted average for that individual elected official. Any questions here with the elected officials? Okay. All right, if we can go to the probation pay plan. Thank you. All right, as Kent mentioned, the probation officers currently, they have a mandated minimum salary schedule set up by the Indiana Judicial Conference. So what we've shown here today is the actual salary what each probation officer is being paid, their years of service. This differs just a little bit from the county hire date because we count their years as a probation officer. So this looks a little different than what you will see for the other employees. There were a few officers that had previous experience before coming to Montgomery County, so we've counted that time. So then the next three columns have the 2025 minimum salary schedule amount according to when they hit their hire date. Those were the amounts according to that mandated schedule. And then Montgomery has had a pay policy where they require that problem-solving court certification, and it's been in the practice of compensating those probation officers an additional $5,000. So we've shown that. So we have a total 2025 total minimum salary for each of the officers, and then shown the cost to move those. And so the total cost was $49,043, or a 4.49% increase. And there's some notes there about the compliance, and if there's any additional, the schedule allows for additional pay for specific education, extensive training, special skills, so that any information that is not listed or stated here was not included, so there may be some variances. So I did in your packet provide you the actual mandated schedule that looks like this. I think that's on there. And then also what has been recommended by the Probation Officers Professional Association of Indiana. There's a schedule, what they've conducted their own survey for probation officers, and so I've included the results of that, of what they are recommending based on their study. What I will say that is a positive about what they are recommending is that they have calculated an hourly rate for those probation officers, and then depending on the work hours of the county, they have set the different salaries. Because currently, regardless of whether a county works 32 hours or 40 hours, they have to pay their probation officers the same salary. So this recommendation from this board is, I think, moving in the right direction, but again, this hasn't been passed or approved, and it's not been mandated, but I wanted you to have that information. That they've been talking for the last couple of years that some of these changes will come down the pipeline, so just so you have that heads up. And then there should be one last sheet. It should be a cost summary. So here we have just kind of summarized in big picture what you're looking at. For each category, I've listed the total salaries. Those are your current 2024 salaries for all the positions in that group, except for any part-time positions or proposed positions. And then I've listed out the total longevity cost for each category, that percent increase, and then the internal, for those that we compared the internal base salaries, what that looks like, as well as the cost to the external midpoint. And then we've done a grand total at the bottom. So, looking overall, for the implementation of the longevity pay would be a 2.29% increase over your current salaries. The internal base adjustments overall were a 2.38% increase. And then the external midpoint, a 10.63% increase when you're looking at all the positions. So for the external midpoint for the SO chief deputies, we used the 85% option. That's what's listed there. And then for the probation, we used the cost to the total 2025 total minimum salary. That's everything that I have. We do have ordinances for you. You want to move those folders up there? Can't mention the next steps as far as adopting the ordinances for, or adopting the job descriptions and the classification system and the maintenance plan. So I have copies of those I made one copy for the full council and one copy here. And I believe Tom also has those electronically.
Get Dan. Have you seen those yet, Dan? Do you have yours?
You have any questions for us today?
Right.
Addie,
Go ahead,
just,
Brett.
Yeah.
Or Tom?
real quick, Addie, in the cost summary, I didn't notice elected officials on there. Do we need to add that?
No, we did not include the elected officials on there, just as far as depending on which option you go with, as far as, we did provide the percent increase on their individual sheet there.
I know as far as the committee, myself and Steve and Jake and Jim Fullwider, and Tom, we appreciate all your work that you've done. We appreciate all the work that the department heads have done as well to get us to this point, to where at least we know where we're at, and we know what we can do. I know we talked about having a Q&A with you guys and the department heads, and Tom, do you know about when we might want to do that?
The Q&A for department heads?
Yeah, because we didn't want to do that today. We want them to kind of be able to digest this a little bit and then come in with us.
Yeah, I think we need to send these out to our department heads after
Yeah.
the meeting, have them look at that, and have a meeting in a week or two, depending upon when Kent and Addie are available. So I would say the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and thank you guys very
Thank you.
much.
Yeah, thank you for
We
this
appreciate
information.
it.
This is the exact kind of stuff we needed really to revamp our pay program and figure out how to better, in the long term, take better care of our employees to make sure that it's simpler and easier to understand from what we are currently doing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Tom, I have job description binders for you and for folders for the departments.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we will take this all under advisement. This is a lot of information to digest, and then we'll figure out a way forward from there with the committee and some future meetings as well. So I guess at this point, stand by to stand by. Moving on, any old business? Any funded organizations? Or is everybody got to go to the bathroom? Department heads. Go ahead, Brian.
Good morning, or almost afternoon, but
Almost.
just real quick, I just wanted to let you know from the Public Defender's Office that we have some preliminary numbers from the state PD office. If you remember, the state PD office runs a reimbursement program for up to 40% of reimbursable expenses from our budget. They've run some preliminary numbers, and I just want to give you a heads up. We'll be coming to you hopefully within the next couple of months with a proposal. They believe they can save us substantial money by getting back in their program. And quite frankly, I was surprised that we're as close as we are, because I believe from what they're suggesting at this point, we would not need to hire any additional attorneys based on the caseloads that we have. Once we get our fifth, we also have a young lady who just graduated law school, is getting ready to take the bar at the end of this month, and hopefully in October be fully licensed and so forth. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we'll be looking for that in the next couple of months. It'll be my office, and probably somebody from the state is willing to come and give a presentation also as to what the numbers actually show. Because for those of you who don't know, Montgomery County got out of the program back in 2013 because the caseloads were getting too high. It was going to be more expensive to stay in it than to get out of it at that point. But now, with what they're reimbursing and the caseloads, and it would just help, if we can get in the program, it'll help our longevity, keep attorneys and so forth, and that type of thing, so.
Good news. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other department heads, elected officials? Oh, go ahead. Tom?
Yeah, Adrian's out this week, but she asked me to come in, and I just want to have them introduce themselves to you. We have interns. We have had interns for the last about 10 years. Most of them come from Wabash. I think all these gentlemen are from Wabash. But every year they come in, they help us out, primarily with the vector control program we have. They go out and do trapping. They identify mosquitoes, separate them by sex, actually. If you believe they can do that, they do it. And then they send them into the state and they're tested primarily for West Nile virus. And so they're a big help in that regard. They learn a lot. They shadow each of us, on the different departments, different things we do. They learn quite a bit, and we appreciate their help. So I got 3 of them here. You guys want to come up? They come from near and far, and they're going to tell you.
My name is Precious Ainabo. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a student at Wabash College.
I'm Zach Balecki. I'm from around here and the Zionsville area. A good majority of you probably know my mom. I'm going to be a senior at Wabash College as well.
Hi, I'm Barrett Smith, and I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I also go to Wabash College.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Any other elected officials? I'll start at that end. Brett, what you got?
Just being a farm kid, I'd like to know how you sex the mosquitoes, but
This meeting's gone long enough.
No, I was, Tom, we had a meeting the other day, and you went to the courthouse, and how did all that go, and how are we going on as far as the courthouse on that end of things?
Yeah, the last week we met with department heads to review the updated plans. So we're working on the final bid documents so they can go out in the next week or so. And then we'll be opening bids in early August with the goal to award the bids in the end of August and begin construction in September.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to Ken and Addie for this wonderful report they
I want to thank the committee that worked on this pay study, and obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, but you know, we've made a lot of progress so far, and I appreciate all the employees that took part in this, and, you know, bear with us as we move on down this road, but, you know, your input certainly will be a big part of how we flesh this out and make it suitable for everybody. So appreciate everybody's time and effort on that. I'll take it, yep.